In 1981, Gary Becker published a treatise on the family, which for the first time used the tools of economic analysis to study the family as a fundamental social unit, a topic returned to in our third conversation. Why do people stay married or get divorced? How can we better understand changes in fertility rates? Why has the institution of the family changed so radically in recent decades? Other topics addressed in this third conversation include Becker's contributions to our understanding of human capital, especially in relation to education. Joining Becker for this final conversation is Edward Lazear, Professor of Human Resources and Management Economics at Stanford University and a Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution.
Gary, if you look back at the stock market crash of 1987, or look at the more recent decline in the NASDAQ, huge decline in the NASDAQ, we know that those have had big effects on physical capital, on the wealth in the economy, and yet if you look at the economic activity that's associated with those declines, it tends to be minimal. Particularly 1987, there was almost nothing that one could see, and yet there was a 25% decline in the stock market. Similarly, right now, we have a decline in the NASDAQ that's huge, and yet really very little effect on the economy. Why is it? Why is that the case that when we see this enormous decline in physical capital, we don't seem to see much impact on economic activity?
Yeah, I think we see in '87 essentially no impact, and now it's going to be very hard, I think, ex post to detect the impact of the stock market crash on this mild recession. I think fundamentally, if I had to give one force, the fundamental force is the great importance of human capital in the economy and the fact that movements in human capital are unrelated to movements in physical capital. So if we, as a rule of thumb, say that human capital provides about 75 to 80% of the total capital in the economy, that's what wages and salaries plus entrepreneurial income amount to, then even a 25% decline in, say, equity would only mean, let's say, a 4% or so decline in total wealth. And a 4% decline in total wealth is not going to produce any huge effects on the economy.
Well, you emphasize human capital, and that makes a lot of sense. But when we think about human capital, one of the major forms of human capital is investment in formal schooling, college education and graduate school and K through 12 education. Now, does that mean that the decline in the physical capital sector will have no impact on the investment in human capital, or should it have an impact? I mean, do you think people will change their behavior in terms of wanting to go to school as a result of the current decline in the market?
Well, as you know, economists look on going to school as in large part an investment activity, that people have a cost today in terms of any tuition, and plus the time that they have to give up, that they're not working, that they're spending it in school. And for most of the education, particularly the higher you go, the more important are the foregone earnings. So people contemplating continuing with school or dropping out will make two calculations. One, what's the cost of going? And what are the expected benefits over their remaining lifetime? Because schooling is a capital investment that has long-lived returns. It largely takes place over one's lifetime. Okay. So now if you look at recessions, recessions are by definition short-term typically. They have an effect on current economic opportunities, in particular the availability of jobs and the like. So let's say I'm a young person who has graduated college, I'm working for a few years, my opportunities go down because banking sector is down and this sector is down. And I say, well, maybe it's a good time for me to continue my education. My costs are down because bonuses aren't so high now, maybe even I'm unemployed. Why don't I continue my education now, and by the time I finish it, let's say I take an MBA or I take a PhD or I go to law school, whatever it may be, by the time I finish, the expectation will be that this current slowdown will be over and I'll be able to get normal returns. So it's a good time to take education. And we do find, and this is one of the, I think, more interesting implications of human capital analysis, that contrary to investments in machinery and plant and in other types of physical capital, which are highly pro-cyclical, by that I mean During good times, they increase enormously, and during bad times, they basically disappear. Human capital is just the opposite. During good times, they tend to increase, particularly in some sectors, and during bad times, I'm sorry, they tend to increase, and in good times, they tend to slacken off. And that's because people are taking advantage of the greater sensitivity of the good and bad times to current costs as opposed to long-term returns. It's the comparison of benefits and costs. That's what the theory of human capital, I think, has taught economists, it's taught non-economists, and in order to try to evaluate why people go on for education, sure, there are other motives, but among the major motives are this investment component of education, that people are looking at the long-term benefits, comparing that with the cost, the sizable cost, foregone earnings being the major one for most forms of education, and they make the decision in good part on whether the benefits have risen relative to the cost or have declined relative to the cost.
All right, well, when we think about the benefits, what would be the major factor in changing the benefit side?
I think it's mainly the growth of knowledge-based technology, knowledge-based production activities that have increased the returns to all types of knowledge and information and skills. They're all, I'm going to treat them all the same thing, as all as the major component of human capital. That human capital is investments in the knowledge, skills, and information of people. That's basically what it is. It's very simple. It's a fancy word describing a very simple process, but that's basically what's going on. And what's happened to the economy over the 20th century and over the last 2 centuries, from the beginning of the 19th century, a continuing growth in the application of knowledge to the economies. That, I think, was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was the first systematic attempt to apply scientific knowledge to the workings of the economy. And as it does that, it means that the workers who are more productive are increasingly workers who can command a significant amount of knowledge, general knowledge of principles and specific knowledge of particular processes.
Well, if we think about the modern economy and we compare that to the one that we were thinking about even 50 years ago, the biggest change perhaps in the modern economy is the role of women. Women have not only increased their participation in the labor market, but there's been an enormous increase in the average level of education among women as well. So what would human capital theory, or what would that tell us about the increased importance of women in the market? Why is that? Is that something that's changed in the structure of the economy, the nature of the jobs are different, or is it something on the side of the family that's caused that to happen?
It's a combination of these forces. Clearly, the nature of the jobs are different, the declining role of manufacturing, growth of services, where women have been and continue to play a much more important role. That's one factor. Second factor is important changes in the family structure, so that families are smaller. Women used to be able to spend full time taking care of their children because they had 4 or 5 children. You go back to the beginning of the 20th century. The birth rates in the United States were about 3 to 4 children per family. And so then that was a full-time job, taking care of your children. Women had some education, but their education was oriented toward household activities, not toward market activities. They didn't major in engineering or economics. It was home economics, not what we would call economics, and other activities that were much more suitable for the household. That's changed drastically. Household doesn't take that much time. They have durable goods that they can help out with it. So modern women are not planning on spending most of their life taking care of children. There aren't enough children and have other ways to take care of the household activities. And so they're planning for working in the marketplace. Now, in order to be productive in the marketplace, we just said you have to have more human capital. And so women have shifted, not only increasing the amount of education they have, but changing, I think it's even more important, they've changed the form of the education they have. They're investing now in market-based skills. They're majoring not in home economics, but in the same sorts of things that men major in, more or less. In MBAs, 40% or so of people in MBA programs are women. Medical school, a half of the enrollments are women. Law school, roughly a half overall are women. Economics PhDs, growing fraction of women. And you can see that in every single set of activities. So women are now preparing themselves in which they still will do more of the household activities, but most of the time working time will be spent working in the market sector and not in the household sector. And therefore, they're adopting to what a modern economy is, knowledge-based. So they're getting the knowledge that will enable them to be productive in the market economy. And they are being productive. The gap between the earnings of men and women have narrowed significantly in the last 20 years.